Hi, and welcome to this exclusive series on empowered parenting, where we dive deep into conversations with inspirational mothers who have overcome their challenges and have valuable insights to share with us. Today, I want to welcome Priya Munjal, a mother of two, living in London, lawyer by profession, and also a conscious parenting coach. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today. Welcome, Priya. I'm so
Thank
happy to have
you.
you today.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited because I know it's going to be such a meaningful conversation. I can't wait to get started. But before we begin, see, we always say that motherhood is kind of a rebirth for us. It changes us in many ways, right? It changes our priorities. So I want to know before becoming a mother, who were you? What was your life like?
Oh, I love that question. I grew up in London, as you advised earlier. I have a older brother, and I grew up with him and my two parents. Very sort of vanilla life. We grew up in a house in North London. I was a very bubbly girl. Kind of lived in a slightly Bollywood dream. I always imagined growing up and, having a beautiful married life, children, living with the in-laws.
Wow.
I was a bit of a people pleaser, if I'm honest. There were elements of me that just wanted to make everyone else around me proud. And I think, just having a circle and a unit of people around me that I felt loved by, that was kind of what I uh, always prayed for and always wanted. I was a very bubbly, happy child, but in my own bubble.
Wow. So you knew from the beginning what you wanted, your
Yeah,
priorities in that sense.
at least I thought I did, but I think it came from a slightly naive place, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So now coming to your motherhood journey, how was it? Was it easy? Was it challenging? How was it
Okay,
for
I
you?
mean, I'm going to tell you something that's almost embarrassing to share. When I got married, it was a given, right? I was going to become a mother. I'd almost told myself there was no two ways about it. I'd always wanted to be a mum. My husband and I had spoken about children before we got married. It was just something, not just something that you do, but something that I thought was a right, a that the next meaningful step in my life after I get married. Um, and when I fell pregnant with my son, who is 11, I instantly thought, well, I love pregnancy, so this is going to be great. I'm made for this. This is in my design as a woman and as a person. I found pregnancy absolutely beautiful. I was one of those few women, and my husband found it hilarious. He would just see me kind of just waddling around in just pure joy and bliss most of the time. I didn't struggle with the fact that I was carrying a whole human in my body, and the fact that so many changes were happening in the body. And I immediately assumed, well, this is how it's going to be when he's here. This if I'm finding pregnancy easy, this means I'm going to find motherhood easy. And that kind of it continued on that trajectory, because when he was born, I also didn't struggle with I was very lucky. I know postpartum is a very real thing, but I didn't struggle with the lack of sleep. It's like my body just went into this sort of response where your body does do. Your body almost protects you, right, from that lack of sleep. But I kind of embraced it, which in hindsight, when I think back, I'm like, no, it was actually very unhealthy. But mentally, I told myself, well, this comes with being a mum, so you just have to smile and do it. So I got on with with the lack of sleep, excuse me, and the crazy hours of being up and down and in and out of sleep. I embraced the changes in my body. I was very lucky that I didn't have these major changes that so many of us as women have to try to adjust to. My body kind of kind of got used to it, the changes, and then I didn't see too much of a difference after a few months. So I hate to use the term bounced back, but I had so many people telling me, you just bounced back. So here I am in my bubble, right? I'm thinking, this is incredible, you know. And then I think the crashes started happening probably somewhat around the age of 2, but without me realizing, and more so around the age of 4 is when I actually realized that everything that I've just told you was actually just this big misunderstanding. This was not me being a perfect mother, nor was this me being better than all those mothers out there that struggle. This was me being completely delusional.
Oh
It
my
was me.
God.
Yeah, yeah.
That's such a refreshing perspective, and I definitely would like to more know more about that, you know. Uh, but I want to know, what was your biggest struggle in your motherhood journey? What was the
Mm.
biggest challenge you had to go through in this?
I mean, I think there were so many, but if I had to narrow it down to one, I think it was really realizing, that my children are sovereign beings. They are independent souls, and they are not here for me to control. They are not here for me to decide every aspect of their life. They are they are souls that have their own thought process, their own growth. They come with their own karma, they come with their own desires, but they also come with every single emotion possible and no idea how to handle them. So when my particularly my first child, more so my first child, when he started exhibiting behavior that I would, you know, and most parents would call difficult, you know, we call them tantrums, we call them meltdowns, all the different names that we give to, you know, difficult behavior. I would instantly just think it was my child trying to upset me. You know, it was my child is being difficult. He's not listening. He's not uh you know, I'm the one in charge here and I should be in control. And therefore, you know, the fact that I could not control those feelings and that behavior made me realize that I had the whole idea of parenting actually completely wrong, because this child came into this world with no idea how to handle those feelings. He didn't come into this world with all these skills and knowing how to deal with the feeling of being disappointed because he didn't get a cookie, or upset because you're telling him to go to bed. He has no idea, and it's my role to teach him those skills. But actually what I thought was, well, you have a child, and that child will just listen to you. And if they don't listen to you, you have the right to tell them off, or to scream at them, or to shout at them, and they should listen, they should acquiesce. So when I realized that actually that's not how it works, my little dream and my bubble of having this amazing child who's obedient and who listens and who doesn't cause me any stress because I'm such a great mum, right? Because I'm the great mum, so he's not going to misbehave. That just completely just got smashed, right? It was this dream that just got completely wiped away. Um, but I think the other struggle, if I was honest, it's hard to put one, but you know, put it down to one. But the other thing that I faced was when my son turned 2, about 3 or 4 days after that, it was actually exactly 4 days after that, my mother passed away. So my mum battled a really long journey with cancer. She had cancer many years before she passed away, which then came back as terminal cancer. So, not only was I battling the reality that she was going to pass, so in the first 2 years of my son's life, so in my very early days of not just pregnancy, but then motherhood, I was also battling with the reality that at some point very soon, I was gonna lose my mum. But I also then had to parent my child from a place of grief when she passed away. So
Yes.
when he was 2, and that was obviously, these are his peak years, right? Where everything that you are doing in your process of raising your child, it's really fundamental at that point, and it really sticks with your kids. That was also a time for me where I was grieving the loss of the closest person to me in my life, and that in itself created a different struggle. So I think I was struggling with two completely different things, a realization about what my role actually is as a mum, and what kind of skills our children come into this world with, which is basically nothing and none, at the same time as dealing with grief, which was really, really, really difficult.
No, it's got to be really difficult. I can't even imagine not being there fully present, because you're half here, and
100%.
from a place of grief, it can be like really challenging to even do basic things. So
Yeah.
I can imagine. So, is that the moment you realized, or did it take you time to actually realize? Because now you talk from an evolved perspective, you talk
Yeah.
from a perspective of a conscious parenting coach. You have come a
Yeah.
long way. But at
Yeah.
that point, what made you have that realization, that breakthrough, that okay, something is wrong here, or
Yeah.
I need to take some action? What was that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, and it's really hard, and I commend all parents that talk about this, because to be able to sit in a space of honesty and vulnerability and share these things is really difficult, and it's something that I think is so important. So thank you for asking that, because yeah, absolutely, I do come from a slightly more evolved place. I always have more work to do. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe we're ever fully evolved, but I definitely went on a journey. So yeah, I'd love to talk you through that. So the answer to your first question is it definitely the realization did not happen when mum passed away. No, it still took me, I think, another year to a year and a half. So when my son was around 3, kind of coming on to 4, I started really struggling with his behavior. So if I take out all the kind of evolved elements of myself and really just take myself back to that moment, the words that come to my head are words like rage. I felt so much rage, and so much just, I felt so out of control when he was behaving like what in hindsight I know is a very normal 3-year-old or 4-year-old, but what to me just seemed like a monster. So a child that was misbehaving, not listening, raising his voice a bit more, testing boundaries with me. And I noticed that the rage that I was feeling was coming from a really strong desire to have control. And that desire to have control was not the same as just a mother or a parent or a father wanting to control the situation. So, if your child's having a tough time, you want to help the child out, you want to keep control of the situation, you want to make sure they're safe. I don't mean that kind of control. I mean that I literally needed to control that individual human being. I needed to assert every single part of myself to control him. Now, luckily it didn't lead to anything like, physical abuse. I didn't go that far down the line, but the rage I felt, I remember shouting at him, I remember screaming, I remember just feeling as though, he was the problem. And it just one day, and I remember exactly where we were. We were in our house, and I was actually pregnant with my second child. So you're now adding in a whole extra layer. So by this point, this means he was 4. So I was very heavily pregnant by this point, and I remember we had just moved into a new house. Now, previously we had lived with my father-in-law, which came with its own challenges. But we had now moved into our own house, and obviously it was a big adjustment, because I was now doing things that I wasn't doing in the old house. So we had some home help in the previous in our previous home with my father-in-law. So there were a lot of things that were being done for us. We were really well looked after in a way. And when we moved into the new house, it was pregnancy plus housework plus work plus a child that was exhibiting the desire to really get control, have control over himself and make decisions himself. And we had a disagreement about something. I think he wasn't eating his food, and I think if I remember correctly, he ran out of the kitchen, and he just started shouting back at me. So it was a battle. It was me against this 4-year-old beautiful little boy, but it was a tennis match. It was like we were practically throwing balls at each other. I was going, then he was going, and then it just hit me. I just thought, oh my God, who is the adult here? Who is the adult and who is the child? Like, there's no adult in the room. There is no adult here. And I just broke down. I just broke down and I thought, I am completely out of control. I'm screaming at a 4-year-old. And that was it for me. I just, from then on, I realized that something had to change. I started reading books. I started investigating. And not only did I read books about children and their psychology and how their brain works, but I started understanding actually the main things I needed to start understanding was about your own inner child wounds. So what is going on inside? And that was where that was where my journey really started. So we're going, my son is now 11. This was when he was 4. So we're going back a good 6-7 years. And yeah, that was a defining moment.
My God. But the fact that you realize that, you acknowledge that, but I don't think many people actually are able to acknowledge the fact that there's something that they need to change. Everybody, or most of the parents think the kid is the problem, like you mentioned.
100%. Yeah.
So how can, I mean, we gently push the parents, nudge them to understand, look within? I mean, I'm hoping to do that through this conversation with you
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
But what are the key things that, initial baby steps that you took, small actions that people can take
Yeah. Oh,
with
I
you?
love that. Yeah. So, I mean, I think for me it was like I said, firstly, just trying to say to myself, okay, I clearly don't understand children in the way that I thought I did. So have that. Well, actually, I'm going to take a step back. Before that, compassion. Okay, before anything else, step into a place of compassion and just say to yourself, okay, I'm struggling. I am the adult here, but clearly I am going through some sort of pain that is stopping me from being able to look inside, and instead is causing me to shift all of the focus and the blame on the child. So that you need to have compassion with yourself first, because once upon a time you were a child, right? And you may remember small things about your childhood, but you may not remember the things that have led you to this point. So start with compassion, because everything that you're going through is coming from something that might have gone on when you were a child. And it doesn't have to be something major. You don't have to have gone through some huge trauma. It could just be the way you were raised. And it may be that you love your parents. So even if you are questioning the way you were raised, it doesn't mean you have bad parents, right? So have that compassion and just follow this thought process that I've obviously got something going on inside of me that is making me it's causing me to struggle. Let me just hold myself in that space for a minute and give myself compassion. And I think the next step would be to then say, right, what do I need to do? What help do I need to get? How is that going to look? Can I just start with baby steps, like saying, what does self-care look like? Because if I'm struggling, I have to start eliminating or bringing in little steps in my life that are going to at least help me get to a more uh, sort of aligned mental space, right? So that could look like just evaluating your day-to-day life. Like, do I get enough sleep? Okay, right. If you've got a very young kid, a newborn, okay, let's be real. You're not going to be able to solve much there. But if you've got a slightly older kid, okay, am I scrolling on my phone all night before I sleep? Okay, well, let me take a step to maybe change a few little habits that will solve the lack of sleep. Okay, do I eat enough? You know, do I take care of my diet? Do I wake up and actually have a good breakfast? So tiny things to just start evaluating. Am I doing anything in my day-to-day life that I could slightly tweak? Like I said, either add something or remove something that will just slowly get me into a better sort of mental state. That would be the very first thing. And that's the first of many steps, right? So we're talking a bit of a process here. But if you're asking what the first thing I would say is, it's really
I
compassion,
think it
and
goes, yeah,
and then
hand
just
in
look
hand.
at these first couple of things that you could either, you know, remove or bring into your life just as a day-to-day self-care. Start from that.
And I believe there's no first or second. Maybe it's different for different people what they
100%.
need to work on
Yeah.
first. And
Yeah.
the key is inner work. The key is to look within, from what I
100%.
understand. Right.
100%. I completely agree. I completely agree. It's all inside you. And I think the problem is, whilst it is inside us and you do have to go inwards, I think the struggle is that very concept, because going inwards is the
How
most
easy and
painful part.
how easy or difficult is it to look within?
Oh, I mean, if I'm going to tell you about how hard it was for me, I mean, it's still ongoing, Neeti. I don't think it ever stops, right? But if I
No.
talk to you back then, um, I mean, the first thing I mentioned earlier is if you're evaluating your own upbringing, right? You know, if you start saying, okay, I'm trying to control my child. If I look at the patterns, does that mean that my parents controlled me? Now, if you came from a household where you still have a good relationship with your parents and you love them, it is really difficult to then turn around and say, ah, I need to look at my childhood,
Yeah.
right? Because immediately you think, right, if I'm looking at my childhood, that means that I'm going to start dismissing everything wonderful my parents did for me. And surely that means I don't love my parents, I'm ungrateful. But I want us to all change the narrative there. And the way I always look at it is this: use it as data. Go into your childhood, try to remember the things that, and you know, sometimes it's hard to remember, sometimes people remember easily. Try to look at the way you were raised, try to understand if there are any patterns that are showing up, but do it as data. Gather data and use that data for your healing, and use that data for your raising your own children. It doesn't mean you're saying anything horrible about your parents. Yes, it might bring up a few things where you think, oh, okay, mum and dad could have done that differently, then maybe this would have happened. Oh, I remember my mum raising her voice at me. Okay, that's fine. You can still love mum. You can still love dad. You can just acknowledge that that's data and I'm using it to heal. So to answer your question, it can be really difficult because so many of us firstly feel that guilt if you're looking at your parenting, right? Your children, your parents' parenting. But then the other difficult things are some of the things that come to light when you start looking inwards almost make you feel like your whole life so far has been some kind of a lie, or has been some kind of a mystical thing that you had no control over. And I'm going to give you an example. So for me, people pleasing was a huge thing, right? And only when I looked into my own inner child wounds and really went deeply inwards did I realize, you're a bit of a people pleaser. Okay, what did that look like? So then I had to look at my friendships. Then I had to look at the way I interacted with other human beings. Now, when you start doing that, it is really painful, because then you start questioning, does that mean I was fake? Does that mean that wasn't really me? Like, what does all this mean? So it is painful, but you know what? You come out the other end, or I say, I maybe not other end, because you know it's an ever going process, but
It's
maybe
ongoing,
you
yes.
come through, as you come to these realizations, you feel more and more free by the minute. And that freedom translates into how you raise your children. And that's the most powerful bit, right? The freedom you gain from healing, from looking inwards, from understanding your patterns, from understanding your wounds, that then shows up in how you raise your children. right? That authenticity that you guide yourself back to shows up in your parenting, and that is where the magic really happens.
Amazing. First of all, I want to go back and thank you for sharing the way you especially mentioned that if we are, re-examining our childhood doesn't mean we are dismissing our parents or their parenting style. Thank you for sharing that. And that's really important to clarify here that we are doing nothing of that sort. It's you using it as data. So thank you
100%.
for
Yeah,
sharing that so beautifully.
yeah.
I
Thank
couldn't
you.
have said it better. Secondly, now I want to ask for a little proof of concept, little if you can
Yeah,
share a little example. For example, in your own journey or someone you
yeah,
know, how when you took actions differently or you
yeah.
showed up differently, how the outcomes differed. Could you share
Wow.
from your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of my favorite things to share actually, because you only see when you see the magic, you
Yes.
can't stop talking about it, Neeti. That's a problem. I could have this conversation with you and it could go on for hours, because when you see the difference, it's really powerful. So yeah, I'll give you an example of how I've started showing up differently for my son, right? And I talk more about my son than I do about my 6-year-old daughter, because he was my awakener, and it's the most beautiful thing that I thank him, as many times as I can for that. So my son had a lot of big emotions, as all kids do, right? So and as I mentioned earlier, your kids come into this world with all kinds of emotions. They can feel every emotion, but they do not know how to handle them, right? So when I used to, I already described to you, for example, how I felt the rage, right? And what the rage does is it either causes your child to start suppressing their emotions, which I think is the effect it had on my son, because what started happening is mum was afraid of his big feelings, right? And because mum was afraid, and mum's being afraid showed up in shouting and battling with him, right? Every time he had big feelings. So what I noticed with him is he started withdrawing. So I started seeing this child that was not just withdrawing, so sort of expressing emotions less, but then when my daughter was born and as she got older, I also noticed although I'd started my healing work, it's a bit of a process, right? So when she was born, initially he had a really good relationship with her, but as she became more vocal as a toddler, I saw he started taking out anger on her. So he started expressing his feelings in the same way as he saw mum express his feelings. And that's unfortunately something that we see so much in families, because children are going to learn what we teach them. So,
Wow. Never thought that way.
and it's really, and the painful thing is he was doing it he was doing it to someone that he loved, his little sister, who also came into this world with no idea how to handle big emotions, and it was basically damaging what was intended to be a fruitful, beautiful relationship between siblings. And that was when I started realizing that whilst I had started doing my inner healing work and I was raising my voice less, I hadn't repaired with Sham, with my son. I hadn't actually. There's some of the damage, and I don't like to call it damage because it's such a horrible word to use as a parent because it comes with guilt. But some of the repercussions, I should say, of my raising my voice at my son and not being able to handle his issues were showing up, even though I'd started my healing. So what I had to then do is work with him to understand how I can fix the wounds that I had already placed within him. And that was painful because I had to accept that this was damage that I had done. And I'm using the word damage again, but this was something that I was responsible for. However, with humility, I had to just go in and do what I had to do. So to answer your question, with my son, what I started to do was very sincerely validate his feelings with consistency and compassion. So anytime he wasn't, even if he was suppressing, I'd had to kind of, so there's times he was suppressing and times he wouldn't. I had to recognize when he was going through something. So whether it was he wasn't sleeping properly, or he wasn't, speaking to me frequently, with an openness that I expected of a child and a mother, right? Those were signs, and I had to watch out for the signs that he was not feeling complete within himself. So what I had to start doing was start speaking to him about emotions and make a really clear distinction between behavior and emotions, and make it clear you can feel everything, my child. You can feel anger. It's okay. You can feel upset. It's okay about anything. But certain behaviors are not acceptable, but all your feelings are. And the more we talked about this, the more he started to understand that the feelings that mummy was once scared of, and that made me scared of me as a child scared of, they don't make her scared anymore. So I don't need to be scared anymore. And what slowly happened is he is able to express his feelings. And what's happened from that is I am now validating his feelings, co-regulating with him. So if he's feeling really angry, I do not bash back with anger. I lend him my calm. So
Wow.
I go in a completely opposite way, because I don't get scared by his feelings, right? And the only way I stopped being scared of his feelings is because I did the inner work to understand why I was scared of his feelings, which we can talk about later. But I then go in, lend him my calm, which is called co-regulation. And now he has learned the skills that he needed now he's 11. He knows how to calm himself down. He'll
Wow.
either come in for a hug. So one of the things he loves to do when he's feeling a bit funny inside, he can't necessarily label it, not sure why. Often happens after school, often happens on days where he had boring lessons that he doesn't like. He's feeling something inside, but he doesn't quite get it. He just says, Mum, can I have a mama hug? He knows what he needs. Or he'll go off and say, I want to listen to some music in my room. I don't want Dulcie, who's his little sister, to be there. They've got a very close relationship now, but he knows his boundaries. So he knows that I need to be alone by myself for a bit. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. Sure. We then manage his sister, explain to her he needs some time alone. Once he's had that time, we're talking 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he instantly feels regulated within himself. We see less tantrums, we see less anger, we see more communication, we see a more stable, a more peaceful child. Now, I'm not going to use the word happy, because Neeti, our goal is not to make them happy, because that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to teach them skills to manage these crazy emotions that they're going to feel as part of their life.
Agree.
You and I
Agree.
still feel them, right? Are we always happy? No. So let's not put this expectation on our kids that they should always be happy. What we want is to help them manage emotions. So
Management.
he now manages all kinds of emotions. He'll come and tell me when he's had a bad day at school, and he'll know 90% of the time, not always, he's still a child, but compared to before, 90% of the time he can understand that something's going on inside, and he knows how to manage it. And sometimes he needs me to help him manage it, and that's all great, and that's what I'm there for. Sometimes, he doesn't. But it is such a powerful change, Neeti, that I wish I could go on the rooftops and just shout this message out to everyone in the world, because the difference you see in your children and the way you're setting them up for life when you parent in a conscious way, when you heal inside to get there, is magical. It's magical.
Wow. Amazing. So, see, while you were able to train yourself, you were able to, become conscious very early on without, going through much damage. You were able to take early on actions.
Yeah.
Now, how are you able to help others? What is the steps others can take, or
Yeah.
what would you recommend? How do
Yeah.
you go about it? If somebody, first of all, one needs to realize that they need to
100%.
take action.
Oh, 100%.
Number
Yeah.
one, right?
Yes. Agreed.
How can one nudge them, or how are you able to kind of spread this message? Number one, and
Yeah.
secondly, how are now working on helping others, and
Yeah.
if you have an initiative in place, a program in
Yeah,
place? I know you talk a lot about these things very openly. I love your content on Instagram.
thank
I'm going to
you.
share your channel under this video.
Thank you.
But I want to know more about how you can help.
Yeah, so I mean, I am taking, as much initiative as you've noticed on Instagram to just share as openly, as vulnerably as possible, the message of going inside, tuning in with what's going on inside, and then at the same time also understanding your children from a neurological perspective as well as an emotional perspective. That's kind of the theme of the page, really, is to learn about children, but also learn about yourself. It's sort of I call them toolboxes. You need tools for yourself and you need tools for your kids, and then you kind of intertwine them. It's not a one way system that you're just looking at your kids and not looking at yourself. So yeah, Instagram is something that it's a wonderful platform. In some ways, social media is the devil, but in some ways it's such a beautiful way to share messages like this. So I share as often as I can. I do also sit one-to-one with parents, and in doing so, really deconstruct what's going on inside them. And I think that's really where the work begins. And you made the most important point without even needing to speak to me, which was that you have to have the realization. The problem is, if you are stuck in the traditional parenting thought process, which is I am the controller, my children have to do as I say, I am in charge, and they owe me. I'm doing everything for them, that I'm sacrificing for them, they owe me. It's very difficult for you then to reframe, in a sense of being able to go internally. But yes, obviously I'm always hoping that the stuff that I share on social media is going to even help those parents reframe it. But I think in order to actually move ahead, you can't unless you are able to really accept that it's going to take inner work. And you have to understand that nobody's going to try to fix your child. If you go on Instagram and look at conscious parenting coaches, look at intentional parenting coaches, there's so many phrases we can use here. None of them are going to say, yep, I can fix your child. If they are genuinely doing the right thing by you and your family, they are going to ask you, firstly, to look within, and they're going to want to deconstruct your patterns. And that's what I do. I work with parents to understand their family dynamic, understand what their initial issues are. Is it lack of listening? Is it bad behavior? Obviously, with teenagers, other issues pop up, so it will very much depend on what age group you're talking about. But then really the work starts with deconstructing what's going on inside of you. And that's work that I just think is so magical, because not only you're getting 2 for 1, because like I said, you end up, if you really do that work, with 2 separate channels of growth, and that's growth within yourself and growth with your relationship with your child. And actually, if you want to make it 3, that child will then have their own growth that happens as they grow up, because they've had such a meaningful relationship with their parents. So
Right.
yeah, so to answer your question directly, I share lots on social media. Please, anyone listening to this podcast, feel free to browse, feel free to DM me if there's things that you don't understand that I've shared. I'm always happy to kind of get into conversations with people on Instagram or other social media platforms and talk about these things. But if you do want to speak to me one-to-one, there's also ways that we can make that happen. My goal is to just change as many lives as possible, Neeti, through this work. I cannot emphasize to you how much it means to me. I am also going to start doing workshops in schools, because that's obviously how we reach parents. And appear on more podcasts. There's opportunities out there for me to speak to different communities, again, that are hoping to bring about a more conscious way of parenting. And I just think it's the most powerful work. And yeah, that's how I'm hoping to share it and spread the message. And final point on that is continue to do the work inside myself, because I will never sit here and say that I am a perfect parent. the most beautiful practitioners out there that share this work. Dr. Becky Goodman, Dr. Shafali. There's so many wonderful people that have been doing this work for decades. None of us, them who have been doing it for decades, me that's been doing it for a few years, none of us will ever claim to be perfect parents. This is a journey that we are all on together. And I think the whole point is create a community of parents that are here to, bounce ideas off each other, help each other, just give each other the motivation, because it's a tough journey, but it doesn't have to be as tough as some of us have been finding it. I think that's really the point.
Absolutely. It feels like a mission for you now.
100%. Yeah, I get quite emotional speaking about it, if I'm honest, because nothing has ever meant
And
anything to me as much as this.
I
As
can
you
feel that.
mentioned,
I can feel that passion in you.
thank you.
And
Yeah, thank you.
I think you're also trying to create a safe space for, parents.
100%. Yeah, I
And
absolutely. I
that's,
think,
like you said, that's what people need, that kind of community to pull each other
yeah,
up. And
exactly.
there's no perfect formula,
No,
right?
and there's no judgment. I
Yes.
think the most
Yes.
important thing is, I think so many parents feel judged, like when other parents come online and say, this is what you could be doing, or this is what you should be doing, this is what I've learned, when other parents come online and do that, particularly parents like myself that have, obviously, when I became a coach, it was through spending, many months working directly under Dr. Shafali, who, if your listeners, don't know about her work, she is someone that is, such an inspiration. So do also look up her work if you feel inspired to. Um, because I'm, advocating for so many different things, the growth internally, the growth with your children, I think people can feel really overwhelmed. Dr. Shafali, often said when I was working with her that, this is not us telling you or me telling you that this is how it should be done. When you go inside and in tune with yourself and really do the deep inner work, you will see for yourself that this is what feels right. So it's not that we're trying to sit there and judge other parents or make them feel inadequate. No, we're all in the same situation. We're all just trying to do our best by our children, and we are all just trying to heal from our social conditioning, from our our upbringing, if there was things there that may have not been the most healthiest for us, from our cultural conditioning. It's all around us. We're being conditioned in so many ways, and we're all just trying to get back to our authenticity, right? And so it's not about judgment. It's not me coming onto social media and saying, I'm a better mum than you, I can tell you what to do. Absolutely not. It's I am here for you. I have been there. I am still there. And I want to be someone that can help you get to a better place more quickly. That's it, with support and with love and
I love that.
compassion.
I love
That's
that.
what it is.
And this is what we are all looking for, right? If someone's reached somewhere, we are only trying to find the path to reach there. And when we get
100%.
there, we'll find someone to help reach to the next level. That's
100%.
that's what
Absolutely.
coaches do, right?
Yes.
We look up to people who are where we want to be.
Yes. That's
And
it.
amazing, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, it's for simplifying this for people and for normalizing a lot of things. Thank you for that. And now I want to ask you, what are your three non-negotiables as a mother in your
Oh,
day-to-day life?
oh, that's a very interesting question. I
Now,
wonder if
from
I
an
can narrow it
evolved
to
perspective, maybe people can
yeah.
think in that.
Well, continuing with the theme of understanding that we're not perfect, right? I think the goal is never to be a perfect parent, it's just to be a conscious parent, right? Continuing with that theme, I think the first one for me is to make sure I am always repairing. And what I mean by that is if I have, which is always going to happen with every parent, however, no matter how much you grow, if I have inadvertently responded to my child in maybe a less conscious way, or say I've reverted back to anger, right? So I've my old patterns show up sometimes if I'm tired, if I've not slept enough, and I raise my voice, right, at my child, or I don't listen to him or her in a compassionate way. One of my non-negotiables is to repair. Now, that repair doesn't mean just say, oh, I'm sorry. That's not what repair is. Repair is acknowledging that in that moment, I did not respond in the healthiest way that I could have. So repair could look like, with my son, I'm really sorry. I realized that I shouted at you, when you didn't put the laundry, directly in the basket, and I got annoyed. This still happens, by the way. Yeah, shouting at silly things which really shouldn't trigger you, but they do. I raised my voice at you when you did that, and really, what I could have done is just taken myself away for a second, and with calm and with a polite, compassionate tone, just reminded you to do whatever it is that he needed to do. What repair isn't is saying, well, if you'd put the clothes directly in the basket, I wouldn't have shouted. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't have shouted. That's not repair, right? So one of my non-negotiables is repair, but repair with humility and just really understand that I need to be able to show my children that I am human. I make mistakes, but I will always apologize for them, and I will take ownership for them, because I'm also teaching my children in that case to do the same. And my children do then do the same. I've noticed it. They do it with each other. They do it with me. You asked for 3. I think my second one is probably going to have to be, I don't ever want to go to sleep with any, hostility or anything left open. So for me, going to sleep, having hugged my children, giving them a kiss, got a kiss back from them, and telling them I love them every single night is a non-negotiable for us as a family. And that goes for the siblings. The siblings give each other a hug and a kiss and a good night. That goes for obviously my husband, their dad. All 4 of us have to have because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. It sounds morbid, but for me, that's a non-negotiable. I always want, it to be that's how we say good night. And I'm trying to think of a third one, because really I have probably more than 3. So what if I have to narrow it down to 3?
I don't mind more.
Oh, I can give you one, actually, because I think this is a really powerful one, and actually a really important one. Not having too many non-negotiables with my children is one of my non-negotiables. So what I mean by that is, I think it's so easy as a parent to get caught up in the things that we call rules and boundaries, right? And boundaries are super important, don't get me wrong, very important. But sometimes we get caught up in having so many rules and so many boundaries and so many that you can't do this and you can't do this and you can do this, that we lose sight of being present and really letting our children explore. So one of my non-negotiables is only having a few non-negotiables with my children. I leave lots of open space for my children to negotiate with me. Does that mean I always say yes when they negotiate? No, but what it means is there's an open forum. It's an open house where you have the freedom to come and discuss with me whatever you need to discuss. There's only a few, or do what you want to do, just if we've decided that that's okay. Then the non-negotiables are things like, you need to sleep. You cannot stay up all night. That's a non-negotiable for me. Another non-negotiable might be nutrition. Make sure you are eating enough food, because food sustains us. Food is important. And then maybe another couple of non-negotiables around the things that they have to do, like going to school. It's a non-negotiable, right? So I don't have too many. Everything else we can talk about. We can have open discussions. And so that's probably my third one.
Amazing. I love that. And I think now it's pretty clear it's more about setting an example for them, and they are
100%.
only going to follow us, follow the lead. I'm
Yeah.
I'm a little curious. I'm going to add one little question here. I'm a little curious because you have a girl and a boy. Just want to know how different it is, and how differently you need to show up for both of them.
Ooh, great question. So very differently in many ways, actually. So boys in general, firstly, have so much more energy, right? Physically, they have more energy that needs to be used and utilized physically than girls do. And we need to create a space where we are not constantly putting our boys in front of, you know, the in front of books or in front of laptops or in front of, you know, screens, at the expense of giving them the ability to utilize that physical energy they have. Because what we're doing is, I think, you know, this is a little bit controversial, but we're often getting ourselves into a space where, when boys are not able to use that energy, and it shows up in their behavior, they're fidgety or they're a bit more kind of mischievous, we immediately give them labels: ADHD, autism, this, that. We start using you know, these labels without actually understanding if that's actually the case, or whether it's simply that we are confining our boys, who have so much more energy than our girls, into spaces that where they cannot utilize that energy. And actually, you might find this surprising, but boys are also a little bit more emotional, right? They're more sensitive. They actually need us to be even more, you know, more or at least equally nurturing as we are with our girls. And I think often there's a misunderstanding that that, you know, because we've got such an old way of thinking often, that, you know, oh, girls are emotional, boys hold their hold their emotions back. Girls cry, boys shouldn't cry. You know, such an old school way of thinking. We often sit in that old way of thinking and then fail to actually bring out the emotional side of our boys and help them to connect with those emotions, you know. And I spoke about this a lot before. It's something that I was doing through my rage, right? Not letting him have the freedom to express those emotions. So that's definitely something that I think we need to be aware of with boys. And with girls, if I'm honest, in this day and age, I think one of the biggest fears, and maybe this is partly a fear that I'm going to project on everyone listening to this, maybe not, I don't know, but I think is, they are very easily swayed by the need for validation amongst their peers. I'm not suggesting that boys aren't, but the current trend seems to be looking like, you know, with the advent of, you know, social media, TikTok trends, all these other things that we're, you know, inadvertently exposing our children to in this day and age. I think we need to be careful that we are giving our children, our girls in particular, enough validation at home, not just over their physical beauty, but also the other things, the other values and the other things that they add to our lives. You know, they are, or not even add to our lives, just add to life. The other things about our girls that are so beautiful, you know, their sense of integrity, their mind, their brains, how smart they are, how intelligent they are, how you know, productive they are and what they're doing. We need to be able to focus a lot more on just the physical aspects of our girls, and focus a lot more on the other attributes, because now I think girls are being dragged into this society where all the focus is on their physical appearance. And I think that's something that I certainly try to focus on with my kids, you know, making sure I'm not neglecting my son's emotions and his need for energetic release, and making sure that I'm not just focusing on how pretty my daughter looks, but actually focusing on her other attributes.
And building her self-worth at an early
100%, 100%. Building her self-esteem, building her self-worth, and validating her from a safe space, so that she does not seek validation outside in the world, right? Us validating them as parents is really important, because we're their first, you know, they look for that from us. It's part of the attachment that they have with us, and it's part of our ability to help grow that confidence within them. But that it also, which is super important, helps them not seek validation from outside, because what we're doing is helping them look within and, like you say, find that self-worth. And I think that's really important.
eventually girls should be able to approve of themselves. That's what we're
100%.
building them up towards. Boys
Absolutely.
should be able to
Boys too,
be
yeah.
in touch with their emotions.
Yes, absolutely. And have enough of a physical, energetic release because of that, you know, the physical need that they have to do that.
Wow. Great. Thank you for sharing that. I know I have I'm just taking more benefit of you than I
No,
should.
I love
I have
this.
so
Oh,
many
please.
questions. And so, okay. So before we wrap up, first of all, I want to say that thank you for sharing all this and being so vulnerable with us and normalizing a lot of things, because it's not easy to share these things and it's not easy to give these personal examples. And you're helping so many people. I can see that.
Thank
So
you.
I really value you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been so wonderful speaking to you.
It's been a master class today, if I want to say. It's been a master class in parenting, and I'm sure it's going to help so many people. And I recommend that all the listeners, all the people watching should follow her. And if you have anyone else that people can follow, you can suggest
Yeah,
such things.
absolutely.
Now, I want to summarize with one final question. If there was one message that you had to give to parents
Hmm.
to hold on to, uh, one takeaway, what would that be?
Oh, I think it's a bit of a deep one, but I think, if everyone just takes a deep breath and really just tries to digest what it is I'm about to share. When our children come into this world and they are sovereign beings. They are sovereign beings, they are independent souls, and they are not souls for us to control. They are not for us to determine and dictate what their life is going to look like. We are just here to facilitate and guide. And in the early years, that guiding is obviously very close knit. They're fully reliant on us. They need a safe attachment with us. But slowly, we have to start accepting that they are independent souls. And I think the more we can be in tune with that reality, the more we see ourselves as independent souls with our own goals and our own journey, the more we can parent our children from a really compassionate, safe, loving, and conscious place. So just remember that we are not their controllers. We're just here to facilitate them and guide them and let them off into their own beautiful life. That's what
Beautifully,
our role is.
beautifully summarized. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for today. I loved
Thank you
having
so
you.
much.
And I think one conversation is not enough, might
I
have
know.
to more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thank you for your time and sharing so much. It's cleared so many things for me also, such new things I have also learned. Um, Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you, Neeti.